Do you think you know true fear? Imagine a quiet town where safety was absolute and danger seemed like a distant concept until one fateful night in 1946, when the Phantom Killer brought a real nightmare to the peaceful streets of Texarkana. Discover the dark details of a series of attacks that terrorized an entire community. Subscribe now so you don't miss the most intriguing mysteries and stories that will leave you breathless. Imagine a small town where time seems to almost stand still. Texarkana, straddling the states of Texas and Arkansas, was like many other sleepy American towns in the 1940s. The streets were always quiet, families knew each other, and days passed slowly, lulled by the sound of transistor radios. The jingling bells on the grocery store door, the smell of fresh coffee at the diner, and an air of safety wrapped around every corner. But not all stories start with darkness already at the forefront. Sometimes tranquility is just the prelude to a nightmare. That town, which seemed protected by a veil of peace, was about to be dragged into an abyss of fear and uncertainty. It was a January night, the kind where the cold air cuts like a knife and the full moon casts unsettling shadows across the town. Young couples would take these moments to escape to the outskirts, where the city lights couldn't reach and the solitude was perfect for a discreet romance. It was an innocent ritual, or so they thought. And it was exactly on these quiet back roads, where only the crickets sang, that something terrible was about to happen. On February 22nd, Texarkana would wake from its idyllic dream to face a nighttime predator, a being lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting, ready to turn any peaceful lover's stroll into a pounding nightmare. No one knew the veil of tranquility was about to be torn. They would soon know the essence of true terror. And so, like a cold breeze down the spine, calm gave way to chaos. Hold your breath. The darkness is just beginning. It was Saturday, February 22nd, 1946, and the night seemed like any other in Texarkana. The sky was clear, dotted with stars shining brightly, and the full moon bathed the road in its silvery light. Under that light, a young couple, Jimmy and Mary, decided to get away from the city for a moment of privacy. They parked their car on a deserted road, surrounded by trees whose shadows danced in the wind. Everything seemed serene. There was a comfortable quiet, broken only by the gentle rhythm of their conversations and laughter. Little did they know they were being watched. In the bushes, the Phantom Killer waited, a figure seemingly woven from the darkness itself. His eyes fixed on the pair, a macabre smile stretched across his face. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. A glint of metal shone under the moonlight as the killer cut through the darkness, approaching the car. Mary was about to say something when Jimmy noticed a strange movement. Before he could react, the car window exploded in two shards, and the hooded figure was upon them. Terror first screamed in Jimmy's eyes, then echoed in Mary's lungs, a high-pitched scream that seemed to reach every corner of Texarkana. There was no time to think, only to feel the panic take over. The attacker was silent, his movements precise and calculated, as if he were performing a vile spectacle he had rehearsed countless times in his mind. Jimmy tried to fight, but was easily overpowered, feeling the cold steel of the blade pressing against his skin. Meanwhile, Mary was paralyzed with fear, the full moon reflecting in her tears. What seemed like hours must have been only a few minutes, and then silence returned, heavy and dense. The Phantom Killer vanished into the night as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving behind a couple brutally assaulted and scarred with a terror they would never forget. When the sirens finally cut through the deadly silence, bringing police and onlookers, Texarkana began to wake to its most terrifying nightmare. Rumors spread quickly, fear taking root in a community that had once felt untouchable. The words "Phantom Killer" began to whisper through the town, growing louder until they became a shared, silent scream. No one was safe in the shadows. And so, the veil of tranquility was irreparably torn. The first scream in the night had been unleashed, and with it, the promise that many more were to come. Texarkana, once a symbol of serenity, was now a boiling pot of fear. The attack on Jimmy and Mary cast a terrifying shadow over the town. Every rustling leaf, every snapping twig made the residents jump from their beds, wide-eyed and breaths caught in dry throats. Local authorities tried to calm the populace, patrolling the streets and offering words of comfort. But how do you comfort someone when the night itself seems to conspire against you? The Phantom Killer was an invisible predator, always present, always watching. With a single attack, he had created a deep, immeasurable panic. Couples who once sought refuge under the cloak of night now avoided every dark corner. The moonlight, which once inspired romance, was now a cursed spotlight of uncertainty and terror. Any elongated shadow became a lurking monster. Stores began closing earlier, and the streets that used to hum with quiet nightlife were now deserted by dusk. The laughter in diners and the distant sound of music were replaced by a heavy silence, laden with fearful pauses. People moved from place to place quickly, eyeing every unfamiliar face with suspicion, afraid that behind any innocent smile might hide the killer's horrific grin. On the second night after the first attack, a young woman returning home alone swore she saw a hooded figure following her from the shadows. She ran, not daring to look back, feeling the air grow heavier with every step. Though she reached home safely, her story spread, thickening the fog of fear enveloping the town. Days passed, but the nights were endless vigils. First suspicions began to spread. Could it be strangers? Or worse, someone from the town itself? No one was above suspicion. Long-standing friendships were tested, and trust, once so strong, began to disintegrate like a house of cards in the wind. Each twilight brought with it a cutting anxiety, an unspoken question hanging in the air. When and where would the Phantom Killer strike next? The alarm in the town turned to explicit dread when the next attack occurred on the stormy night of March 24th. Again, a young couple was the target of the Phantom Killer's torment, the flashes of lightning revealing fleeting glimpses of the horror. The torrential rain couldn't drown out the screams of pain and despair that echoed through the darkness. The bodies were found in the morning, abandoned and violated by cruelty. The town was now a ruin of sadness and terror. Each crime scene was a mosaic of nightmares, essential details and piecing together an inconceivable horror. The attacker seemed to relish the panic he spread, each attack a grotesque signature of his ghostly presence. The newspapers dubbed the criminal the Phantom Killer, a palpable terror. Fear and paranoia grew, and distrust eroded the social fabric of Texarkana. Each night brought the promise of a new horror, and the citizens, once united, began to close off even more, each in their own desperate attempts to protect themselves from what seemed inevitable. The investigations intensified, but leads were scarce. The sandy roads and trees became silent witnesses to each heinous act, and couples who once frequented these places became prisoners of fear in their own homes. But as the town trembled, the Phantom Killer continued his gruesome hunt, turning each night into a roulette of terror. And Texarkana had no idea that the darkness would keep closing in, tightening its grip around the beating heart of the town. When April arrived, it brought with it the promise of flowers and the first breaths of spring. But for Texarkana, April brought only mystery and blood. The Phantom Killer showed no signs of tiring, each act a sinister reminder that he was always near, always watching. On April 14th, the town suffered another blow. Paul and Betty, a young and hopeful couple, were found dead on the shores of a lake outside town. Their lives were taken by the same brutal and meticulously perverse pattern. The air in Texarkana became heavy with the presence of an invisible malevolence, a terror that mirrored its face in the still waters of the lake, in the terrified eyes of the townsfolk, and in the whispers of despair floating on the wind. The community began to look at its own members with growing uncertainty. Who could be the monster that had infiltrated their midst? The police sketched written portraits with the little information they had. A tall man, dressed in dark clothes, possibly masked. But in the minds of the citizens, this vague description was a distorted mirror of every neighbor, every coworker, every distant relative. Fear became tangible when authorities imposed a strict curfew. Night patrols intensified, but each round was a desperate journey to capture a specter. The town, once an enclave of peace and trust, became a prison of shadows, where the slightest noise made hearts race in fear. Even amid the terror, life tried to find ways to move forward. The local church organized vigils, and people prayed fervently, as if they could exorcise the evil with their prayers. But in the whispers of their prayers, there was a hint of resignation, a persistent fear that the phantom killer was more than a man-a-demon, a specter that couldn't be contained by bars or bullets. And so, in April, as cyclists came and went on the roads, each pedal stroke was a leap of faith, each turn a wait for dawn. The phantom killer was always there, a figure at the corners of the mind, the growl of uncontrollable fear, a horror that seemed the prelude to yet another tragedy. As time went on, the phantom killer seemed to feed on the terror he caused. On May 3rd, another couple was brutally attacked. Virgil and Katie Starks, local farmers, were respected and admired by all. The attack inside their home, their personal fortress, completely shattered any thin veil of security that might still have existed. No one was safe anymore, not even in their own homes. Virgil was killed instantly by a shot fired through the window. Katie, wounded but driven by a fierce instinct to survive, escaped and ran to a neighbor's house, bleeding and in shock. Her incoherent words painted a terrible picture that further solidified the panic among the residents. The phantom killer was no longer just a hunter in the shadows. He now invaded personal sanctuaries, dismantling the safety of homes. Texarkana was on the brink of collapse, its deserted streets incessantly patrolled by police and armed inhabitants, all searching for an invisible and relentless enemy. Questions echoed in every disturbed mind. Who will be next? When will he strike again? Why are we being hunted? The psychological terror imposed by the phantom killer was almost as deadly as his ambushes. The mind of every citizen became a maze of fears, where every shadow, every night breeze seemed to whisper about the presence of the hunter. But every hunt comes to an end shortly after the fateful attack on the Starks' home. A new determination infiltrated the ranks of Texarkana's police force. Reinforcements from neighboring states were called in, and the perimeter was tightened even more. The hunt for the hunter took on a fervor never seen before, in a desperate attempt to restore the peace that had been cruelly taken. Even with the attacks mysteriously ceasing, the phantom killer had left an indelible mark on the town's soul. His crimes would be etched into Texarkana's history, a constant reminder that, for a time, fear itself walked freely among them. And so, the curtains of this dark play began to close, but not without reminding everyone that, although the night may seem calm and days return to their routine, the memory of the phantom killer will forever be a whisper in the shadows of Texarkana's collective memory. Decades have passed since Texarkana was plunged into chaos by the phantom killer. The town has changed, grown, and prospered, but the emotional and psychological scars of the attacks run deep. The older residents still vividly remember those days of terror, sharing their stories with younger generations who only know the events through accounts and documentaries. However, even with time healing many of the open wounds, the mystery of the phantom killer's identity was never solved. the case remained filed away, wrapped in conjectures and theories. Some people dedicated their lives to investigating the case, hunting for clues in archives, re-examining old crime scenes, and interviewing anyone who might shed new light on the mystery. Even with all this attention, the identity of the killer remained a mystery, becoming one of the most enigmatic and discussed cases in American criminal history. A glimpse into the future at Texarkana, marked by its tragic history, developed an admirable resilience. The community flourished, built on a spirit of unity and mutual support. Local schools included lessons about the events of 1946, using them as examples to teach about the importance of community vigilance and mutual support. Every year, ceremonies were held to remember the victims, ensuring that their memories were never lost to time. These events, besides being occasions to mourn past tragedies, were also a celebration of the community's indomitable spirit. The legacy of the Phantom Killer represented one of the darkest periods in Texarkana's history, but also highlighted the town's strength and resilience. Through the challenges and fear, the residents of Texarkana proved that, although evil can beset a community, it can never completely destroy it. The legacy left by the Phantom Killer is twofold: a constant reminder of the potential for evil that lurks in the shadows of society, but also an inspiration that even in the darkest hours, solidarity and courage can prevail. The story of Texarkana is a testament to what it means to endure, to remember, and ultimately, to overcome. As this dark chapter closes, the town continues to move forward, always vigilant, always united, and always remembering that, in the heart of every darkness, there is a light that never goes out. Become a guardian of knowledge. Subscribe to our channel to uncover the deepest mysteries and intriguing stories. Don't miss your chance to stay one step ahead of the unknown. Your nights will never be the same again.